Okay, here's the second lecture on Dr. Strangelove. And we start with warriors and politicians. You see these 6 sections I've got here. I'll put that slide up. Ding! And we start with... okay, so I'll roll the film. All right, and you can have a look. All right, so...
Mandrake, do you recall what Clemenceau once said about war?
No, I didn't think I do, son, yeah.
He said war was too important to be left to the generals. When he said that, 50 years ago, he might have been right. But today, war is too important to be left to politicians. They have neither the time, the training, nor the inclination for strategic thought. I can no longer sit back and allow communist infiltration, communist indoctrination, communist subversion, and the international communist conspiracy to sap and impurify all of our precious bodily fluids.
General Turgidson, I find this very difficult to understand. I was under the impression that I was the only one in authority to order the use of nuclear weapons.
That's right, sir. You are the only person authorized to do so. And although I hate to judge before all the facts are in, it's beginning to look like General Ripper exceeded his authority.
It certainly does. Far beyond the point I would have imagined possible.
Well, perhaps you're forgetting the provisions of Plan R, sir.
Plan R?
Plan R is an emergency war plan in which a lower echelon commander may order nuclear retaliation after a sneak attack if the normal chain of command has been disrupted. You approved it, sir, you must remember. Surely you must recall, sir, when Senator Buford made that big hassle about our deterrent lacking credibility. The idea was for Plan R to be a sort of retaliatory safeguard.
A safeguard?
I admit the human element seems to have failed us here, but the idea was to discourage the Ruskies from any hope that they could knock out Washington and yourself, sir, as part of a general sneak attack and escape retaliation because of lack of proper command and control.
Hello? Hello, Dimitri. Listen, I can't hear too well. Do you suppose you could turn the music down just a little? Oh, that's much better. Yes. Fine, I can hear you now, Dimitri. Clear and plain and coming through fine. I'm coming through fine too, eh? Good, then... Well, then, as you say, we're both coming through fine. Good. Well, it's good that you're fine, then, and I'm fine. I agree with you. It's great to be fine. Now then, Dimitri, you know how we've always talked about the possibility of something going wrong with the bomb. The bomb, Dimitri. The hydrogen bomb. Well, now, what happened is, one of our base commanders, he had a sort of, well, he went a little funny in the head. You know, just a little funny. And he went and did a silly thing. Well, I'll tell you what he did. He ordered his planes to attack your country. Well, let me finish, Dmitri. Let me finish, Dmitri. Well, listen, how do you think I feel about it? Can you imagine how I feel about it, Dmitri? Why do you think I'm calling you? Just to say hello? Of course I like to speak to you. Of course I like to say hello. Not now, but any time, Dmitri. I'm just calling up to tell you something terrible has happened. It's a friendly call. Of course it's a friendly call. Listen, if it wasn't friendly, you probably wouldn't have even got it.
So, to go back to the first clip then, Ripper starts talking about Clemenceau. Clemenceau was the leader, the French leader in World War One. At the very end of the war, basically, he, in 1917, took control of the war because nobody could really, in France, nobody could really figure out what to do. I mean, they were just lost. And Clemenceau got them out, and he began to negotiate what became the Treaty of Versailles. And so Ripper is quoting Clemenceau. And so, because the thing is that what you have to realize about these generals, people who would have been generals, say, in the 60s, is that they became generals by starting out as serving officers in World War One. And most of them would have seen service in World War One. And then they would have been colonels or light generals, one-star generals in World War II, and then promoted into the superior ranks by the 60s. So these are people who have been around war. They are professional soldiers. I mean, there's all their lives they had been professional soldiers. That is their job. These are people who probably grew up in military families, and expected to join the military and serve as military. This was their job. They're, as I say, professional military. And so Ripper is talking as a professional military person. And what he's basically saying is that the men in suits don't know what they're doing, but the military knows what it's doing because it's got strategic thought. It's also crazy. So, this is why it's not a good idea to try to draw your civilian leadership from the military population, because they're trained to be military and they're trained to think in terms of war. It's like, no, don't hire a shark, to run a sheep farm. It's like not a good idea. You need a shepherd. Okay. So then we get the politics of Plan R, which Turgidson has to, point to Muffley and say, you don't know what you're doing. And because Muffley says, I'm the only person who can issue a nuclear strike command. And that's true. But let's say, and this is, we now have this kind of stuff in place. It had happened already. It had happened. Because what if there were an attack on, say, the Capitol Hill when Congress was in session and they got the White House at the same time? So you'd wipe out most of the sitting Congress and the president and presumably the vice president. This is why the vice president and the president are not supposed to be in the same place at the same time. Because if the president is killed, the VP is supposed to take over. If the VP gets killed, then the next in line is the Secretary of the Senate, I think it is. Or the Leader of the Senate, I think that's right. So it would be, in our case, Mitch McConnell. Then it's Leader of the House, so there'd be Nancy Pelosi. And then there's a given ranking structure which indicates which civilians take over next. The Secretary of State, Secretary of the Economy, Secretary of the Treasury. I can't remember, the particular. You can look it up. Just look up sort of command structure in case of an attack. Be careful when you do that because you don't want to really draw attention to yourself. Just put on your VPN before you do that. So if there were an attack on, and this is the basis for both Battlestar Galactica, the reboot, and that thing with Kiefer Sutherland, Designated Survivor, because there is a chain of survivors, and somebody has to take over. And that somebody is going to make military decisions. Probably they'll be called on. If there's been an attack, the first thing they'll be called on to do is make military decisions. And ideally, they're cautious people. And that's what happens where you get the Secretary of Agriculture, I think, as it is in the case of Designated Survivor. or school is Battlestar Galactica, right? She's the Secretary of Education, so she was a school teacher, and of course she does very well. I mean, that's the point about those narratives, is that the small person is really not is very uncommon and blah blah blah, all that usual bullshit. Can you imagine if Betsy DeVos got to be the president of the United States? Oh my God, run for the hills! Holy Jesus! Anyway. So that's the politics of Plan R. Then we get, then I give you my little definition of overkill. This is not my definition. Overkill became a word that we began to hear in the 60s. That's right. And then in the 70s, it became if you look at Dispatches by Michael Hare, which a number of you have read closely because I made you, bad Tim, made you read it. You will remember that one of the things that Michael Hare sees, I think it's written on a camouflage cover on somebody's helmet, is "We shall overkill," right? Not "We shall overcome," but "We shall overkill." It's pretty dark humor. It's typical sort of Vietnam veteran humor. But overkill became a thing where there were so many weapons on the planet that you could destroy human life on the planet this many times over. Those numbers are accurate. When I did this research, when I put this little film together, those were accurate numbers. They will be still accurate. And then we have finally the two politicians talking to each other, and it's such a gong show. I mean, the premier is in a bordello, in a house of prostitution, and he's plastered, and they're having a party basically. And here's this phone call about World War III has started, and they are like children, and the discussion is just wonderful. It's just so beautifully, and you never hear the premier. That's the amazing thing, is that it's because Sellers is only doing one side of the conversation. You can just hear, quote unquote, hear what is going on. You can completely hear this other character. It's just an astonishing piece of acting from Sellers, where you get the complete picture of Dmitri, this little boy. But as Stasadsky says, he's a man of the people, but he's a man, if you take my meaning, which is, he's great. He's gone off to a house of prostitution. Oh, wonderful. So another Top Gun erect penis. They are all. This is the problem. They're either afraid that they're not erect, or they are erect, or they're afraid that they're, as Ripper says, that their purity, their essence will be impurified, and we know at that point that he's just a complete Looney Tune. But it's this fear of emasculation, which is why he says, we're coming to this.